Good morning, Cyber Warriors. Today's quick little video, I'm going to show you how to do a for loop in DOS or command prompt, along with how to create a batch file in order to run a command that we know functions and works well and gives us what we need. These are types of activities that may or may not happen to come up. And weirdly enough, restructuring little things like this using the command prompt is actually easier than doing it in PowerShell. PowerShell is easier than with a lot of different things, but this is one of the few cases that I've found where the command prompt is far easier, at least for me, to be able to do these particular tasks. So why don't we just go ahead and get right to it. Alrighty then, so we have an interesting problem. We have a bunch of log files that have been rawed up, which is compressed and broken up into smaller individual files. But the extension is in the wrong place. So Windows doesn't really seem to know and understand how this happens. So these are log files that came from a Unix system. They were compressed on a Unix system. They were rawed up and then separated. And so what we have is a whole bunch of different log files that all need to be renamed. You have to rename it to where the file extension is at the end of the file. So this is standard Windows stuff. So there's a number of ways we can do it. We can hand do it. We can go into the download RARs directory that we have in there and manually right click and do all of that. Or we can attack this problem programmatically. And that's what we're going to learn how to do today. All right. So this, you'll notice, is actually not an administrator command prompt. That's okay. We don't need one for this. All right. So what we first want to do is we want to take a look at how we can get this information quickly and easily using the command prompt. All right. So easiest way to look at the information that's in the directory is dir/b. B means brief, right? So the above directory one, the default one, shows like the date, timestamp, file size, and a bunch of extra information you don't really need, especially when you're trying to do something in a for loop, which is what we're going to wind up doing. All right. So boom, here we have this is exactly how we want to break this information down. It is set up so that we have it in just the extension and the actual file name itself. All we need to do is flip those, right? So what we need to do is take a look at how does the rename, how's it supposed to be formatted, right? So let's actually look at that real fast. Rename and /?. That's how we always look up information, right? Rename or ren, which is the file name 1 and file name 2. So what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to do it something like this. So rename, and I'm just going to grab the first one here, and then we want to do the same thing, except I'm going to manipulate this manually. That is how the command should look. Right, so we have file extension in front, and we need to move that file extension to the rear. So instead of doing this over and over and over, hitting the up arrow, making the changes, let's do it all at once using a for loop. All right, so I'm going to escape out of that, and we're going to write it out. So we're going to use a for loop. So for/f. I'm not going to go into the different types of for loops. You use the different / for different types. I'm not going to go into all of those. That's another video altogether. All right. So now getting back into this for loop and then looking at the file structure that we have, right? We have two different columns of information. One is the extension, the other is the file name. So we have to break those into two, right? So those are called tokens. Each of those columns are called tokens. So we're going to tokens equal 1 and 2. Now you could also do it like this. So if you have two different things and the numbers are contiguous, right? So 1 and 2, you can do it this way. If the numbers are not contiguous, like you want column number 1, column number 3, column number 4, you would do it like this, 3-4. So this would get all three of those fields, all three of those columns that you're creating, and it would do those. But in this case, we only have 2, and we're only going to worry about 2. All right. So -2, and we need to specify the thing that separates them. And these are called delimiters. And so what we're going to do, what is the delimiter in this one? It's a period. So we're going to use that. So delims equal period, end quotes. So now we have the defining characteristics of the information we're going to be using and how we're going to use it. And we're going to start with a custom variable we're going to call string A. In programming, specifically for DOS and batch programming, the % is called string. So we're just going to call it that. It's good practice, good habit to get into. Okay, so string A, and then we're going to tell it where to get that information. So in, and we have a parentheses, and this is a single quote, not a double quote, single quote. If you have a file that you already have created with the information, you don't have to include the single quotes. You can just simply call that file by name and path if you want, and it'll process it normally. But we're going to tell it a command. And when you're telling it a command, you need to use that single quote. All right, so let's go ahead and close it out. So you know that you start with a parentheses, an open parens, and a single quote. It ends with a single quote and a closed parens. So I just kind of built that already, and we'll fill the stuff in the middle already. So what was the command that we used up here to get that information with just those 2 bits of information, right? That was dir/b. So we're going to put that in here, dir/b. Now it needs to know what to do, and we're going to tell it to do. We're going to test it. I like to test things by echoing it to the screen, because when you hit enter, this is like working in the registry. It happens now, and if you make a mistake, like if you're going to delete something, it's gone, and there's no recovering, you're done. So you want to make sure that you actually test a lot of these things first. So we're going to test it. We're going to echo it to the screen. So echo, and then our rename command. Rename, and remember, we're making these into 2 different pieces, right? So we're going to have string A and string B. So 1 token, 2 tokens, A, B, they're alphabetical, they're contiguous. So we're going to take string A, period, because we are taking that out when we're doing the programming, because that's a delimiter, that's a column. We need to reinsert it to go back into here. So, and string B. And now this is the second file name, right, where we need to reverse those. So it's going to be string B, period, string A. So let's take a look at it. For/f, our tokens 1 and 2. Delims is a period. We're starting with the variable or temporary variable A, string A specifically, and we're getting it from the dir/b command. We're going to tell it to echo the command, rename, and then the name format we're going to have, right? So let's take a look at how that works. Okay, so now this is exactly the way we want to look at it. So we have rename, the old file extension the way it was, and then the new file extension the way we want it to be. So this is going to work perfectly for our purposes. So we're going to hit the up arrow, and we're going to get rid of the echo, because now we've tested it and we can run it for real. Boom. See how it looks a little bit differently? right? So instead of actually telling it to do the command where it's looking at that information there, it's actually just simply running the command. We can test it. We always test, trust, but verify. So dir/b, and we see that our file names are now correct. So we have the file name of log files, and our extensions are at the end. So we're now ready to run this with 7-zip or WinRAR or some other compression or decompression utility which allows you to extract these files. It's ready to go, except maybe there's one more thing we want to do with this. We want to make sure that these log files are captured for today's date. So we have today's date as part of the file name for each one of these. So how do we do that? Well, again, we can manually do it or we could do it programmatically. Luckily, the system has a means of identifying the date and time, right? So it keeps the little information down over here, right? You see that in the little corner, you'll see the date and the time. So there's a command that we can run that shows that, right? So that command is date/t. And it shows Thursday and then today's date. So it doesn't actually have the time on there because I didn't want the time. And you can also do time/t. Nope, you can't do that. Yeah, so you can't put them together, which is fine. There's different ways to do it. This is actually, let's show you a better way to do that, right? So if I wanted the date and the time that I combined together all in one fell swoop, we can actually do that. You know what? Let's do it. And we're going to have the date and the time as part of the file name for what we're doing. So here we go. And we're going to take a look at echo because we want to show it to the screen. And, not only is it a command that you can run that'll export the date and the time, but you can actually use the variable that's constantly being updated by the system. So that is date and time. And this is the format of how a variable looks in DOS. In PowerShell, it's just the $ and then the name. This is string, name, string. And that's just something you have to know and get used to. Okay, so now we have the date and time. Enter. Boom. Too easy. Right? So now what we want to do is we want to create this into a variable that has the year, month, day, followed by an underscore, the hour and minute, and we don't need the seconds and microseconds. We don't need that, right? So we're just going to get how many different things. We're going to do the year, the month, the day, that's 3, hour and minute, that's 4 and 5. So we have 5 different things we're going to wind up getting, right? So let's go ahead and start putting that together in a for loop. So let's grab our previous for loop, and we're going to do something a little bit different with it. So we have 5 variables, right? The 5 different columns we want to pull from this, right? So it's 1 through 5. Is that correct? Actually, not correct. What's the first column in all of this? This is the first column. So we need to skip that one. So what we're going to do is we're going to call this 2 through 6 instead. And our delimiters are not periods. So the delimiter is a slash, a colon, and a space. And then we're going to grab our command from above, which is echo date and time, and insert it right there. And we're just going to actually have it echo. So echo, and and we're going to put all of these together, right? So we want our third column first. That would be the year. So that would be A, B, C. So string C, string A, and string B with an underscore. And what comes after C? D and E, right? So let's do string D and string E. Let's see what that gives us. Boom. That's what we need. That's what we want to do and have that structure. All right. So now what we're going to do is, instead of echoing it, we're going to create a variable using that. So we're going to call this our date var for date variable. Okay. Oops. We can't just do that. We have to do something else, which is tell it to set the variable. So this is the command for creating a new variable within there. So you see that it has it's setting it properly. Let's take a look at that variable. We're going to echo it. Echo date var. Excellent. That's what we want to see. Now we're going to do something similar to what we did before. And that was, we're going to rename all of those files. So let's refresh our memory of what those files are called again. All right, so log files and then the extension, right? So we want to prefix the date time information, our date var, in front of those files. So we're going to do that programmatically again. So it's /f tokens. Oh, actually, we don't even have to do tokens this time, do we? We don't. So we can actually just do string A in dir/b, do echo rename, and then we have string A, and then we're going to do date var underscore string A. We see that this is the correct format. This is what we want to see. It's got the rename, it's got the original file name, and it has the new file name that we have attached to it. So maybe we want to push this into a batch file. A batch file is basically a script for DOS batch commands. And we could take this command that we have here, and we could put that into a batch file. All right, and we're going to notepad. We're going to call this fixer. Fixer.bat. And this opens up a Windows, a notepad, and it says this file doesn't exist. Do you want to create it? Yes, we do want to create it. We're going to go ahead and paste our command in there. So I want to do one slight change to this, because if we do dir/b again, we'll see that fixer is in there, and we don't want to include fixer with our command. So we go back into our dir/b and we do L*, because everything else in that directory starts with the log files, right? So we have this, we have that, and we can get rid of the echo because we're ready to go, right? Too easy. Let's go ahead and save this. File, save. All right. Now, in order to run a batch file, you don't have to do any strange weirdness like you do with PowerShell. You just simply run it, right? So fixer.bat, boom. Wait, it errored. Why would it error? We had the command right. It worked before, where it showed us that it should have worked. Why didn't it work? It's because there is a strange thing within the batch files that instead of a single % for temporary variables, you have to have a double %. It's just It's just the way that it functions, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to go back into our notepad, and we're going to add another one there, one here, and one final one here. You don't have to add one to datevar, or you don't have to add anything else to datevar because that already has it and it's good to go. But for some reason, it just needs to have for those other ones in there. So we're going to save that, and we're going to run Fixer again. And it ran. Let's take a look at those files. They now have the date time format in front. So that is a bit of for loop trickery. It's actually stuff that I have done a lot in the past, and it's a pretty solid foundation for the next little bit. Alrighty then, Cyber Warriors, what did we do? We created, we learned about for loops, or simple for loops, in order to restructure some information. Whether it's renaming files, whether it's creating a variable from other variables that exist. There's a lot of different potential and operations you can start from this point to be able to get and then work in the future. As per always, I hope you learned something. Happy hunting, and I'll see you in the next video.